Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. This is the episode for the week starting August 24th. And again, I've got something a little different for you. I want to share a little bit about the astrology business space. So, I'm actually going to talk through 4 tips to help you find or attract clients if you're looking to start or grow your own astrology practice. If you are thinking, Kelly, this isn't what we normally cover, that's true. Many of you longtime listeners know I've been mixing it up a bit this summer. And so if you're looking for weekly forecast info, check last week's episode because that has some astro tips for this week. And next week episode will have some astro tips for the first 2 weeks of September. So we're going to take a little bit of a detour today, which I think will be really useful for those of you who have recently finished your astrology studies or are looking to start your own astrology business. So, in this week's episode, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about when I was a client needing an expert in a particular industry. And that's going to then lead into these 4 tips that I love to share with newer astrologers or senior students to help them get started when they're thinking about finding or attracting clients. In a recent poll on Instagram, I asked what questions people had about starting or growing their astrology business. The number one question that people had was around how to attract new clients, which of course makes complete sense. You know, if you want to build a consulting practice in astrology, you're going to want to create and build a client base to serve. Now, my primary experience as a self-employed person is in the astrological field, but I have worked in other healing and therapeutic modalities earlier in my career. So if you have a service-based business, maybe you're a naturopath or you work in a healing bodywork field of some kind, these tips might also be helpful for you. So, before I dive into the 4 tips, I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story about me recently where I was a client looking to engage an expert in a field, and just to tell you a little bit about how I went about it. And I want you to think for yourself about a situation that you might have had recently where you, as a client or a potential client, were thinking about a particular practitioner, experience, healing thing, or practical thing that you needed. And then think about how you went about finding the person to help you. You know, maybe you needed a new chiropractor. Maybe, like me, you were looking for an accountant. Think about how you found your person to work with. Did you search for someone local online? Did you talk with friends about a referral? Maybe a colleague mentioned something in passing that got you thinking. For me, when I needed an accountant, well, it's probably a few years ago now, I was sort of like, where am I going to find a good accountant? Or how could I connect with an accountant where there might be a level of trust already? And so what I did was I talked to 2 friends who are also self-employed, and I asked who they had used in their business. So who do they use for accounting services? They suggested someone, and off I went to have an appointment with that person. So I took their referral. At that time, this was many years ago now, it turned out that I didn't need an accountant, but I'd paid for their time to review my situation, and the accountant's kind of expert advice was, you don't need an accountant at this time. And that was great, good for me to know from somebody who knew that industry. And I kept that information handy. And a few years later, I reached out to them again. I said, a few things have changed for me where my business is concerned. Could we do another review to see, where things are at? And at that point in time, the person I had met with previously wasn't available, but they referred me to someone in their practice who was taking new clients. And that person has now been my accountant for a number of years, and she's amazing. And so it was interesting for me to think back on that I talked to people who may already be using the kind of services that I was looking for, and I was happy to take a referral from them. The reason to tell you that little story is that people finding you as an astrology practitioner isn't that different from you seeking out a new practitioner or expert in any field. It's kind of similar to if you need a health practitioner or you need someone to help you out with a maintenance project around your house, for instance. What you want to do is you want to be accessible and you want to cultivate a community of people who will point potential clients your way. Just like the accountant who had served their existing clients well, and then those clients referred new people to that accountant. So, when you're getting set up as an astrologer in practice, I know it's an alternative kind of field, even though there's much more interest in astrology as an offering or a service or a helping tool now than there was when I started 20 years ago. I want you to remember that you have skills, you have information, and you have insight that is unique. Especially if you have finished a structured astrology training program with an established practitioner. So, your challenge as you're getting started as a new practitioner in the field is going to be to let people know who you are and what you can offer. What you can offer is a little bit more than I can do a natal chart read or I can do a predictive astrology read. You're going to want to get into how can I help you? What problems might you have that I can share astrology with you to help you solve? And that's getting a little bit into the marketing side of things, but we have to remember that most of our clients aren't thinking in astrological terms, they're thinking in real life terms. I have to make a decision. I feel stuck. I feel confused. And I want to get a better understanding of why I am dealing with the things I am at this point in time, and maybe how long it might last or what I could do to make the most of this space that I'm in. So, the more that you're able to share about how you can help people or what problem you might be able to solve for them, the easier it will be for people who want what you're offering to find you. So, here are some tips that are going to help you do just that. Because when we're thinking about finding clients, we're thinking about connecting with people that we can help or that we can serve ultimately. So, the first tip that I have is give time, not money. Sure, you can definitely run ads. That is an option and it has a level of success. Personally, when I'm looking, or in the past when I've been looking for astrology clients, I've not enjoyed the experience that has come from advertising, but it is an option. You could take out an ad online on social media, you could take out an ad in an industry magazine, you could take out an ad in a yoga journal. There's plenty of places you could advertise either online or in print. But really, what people actually need before they're going to decide to work with you, especially in this kind of alternative, sort of sacred, pretty vulnerable space that is being in session with someone in the space of astrology, what they need before making that decision, they need a taste of your energy, they need a sense of your style, and they want to get a feel for who you are as a person, as well as a feel for the kind of astrologer you might be. So, when I say give time, not money, what I'm referring to here is share yourself, share your take on astrology. And that's going to help people get to know you, to connect with your energy. And that's going to be how people build a connection that they feel like, oh, I would like to sit down and talk with that person in more detail. So, giving time, not money, when you're setting up your practice, you usually have a lot more time than you do money. So, things that you're going to do for this, you might write a blog post, which means you're going to need something like a website to share it on. You can certainly write and share things on social media, but there's a lot of reasons why building your own little corner of the internet, AKA your own website, is a much more sustainable and stable way of creating an online space for yourself. So, writing a blog, you could write something beautiful and email it out to people. You can share on social media. You could give a talk in a local area. So, a local space, a local business, something like a local yoga studio, a health food store, a local cafe. When I was new to the area where I live now, I partnered up with a woman who had this sort of organic homewares clothing store. And once every few months, she would do a sales night in the shop, and I would come in and do mini astrology sessions there. And so, those kinds of connections, I know we think so much about online these days, but don't underestimate the value of in person connections, especially in the beginning when you're building your confidence and you're trying to establish the kind of community or client base that you'll be able to help. So, doing a talk in a local space, yoga studio is a great one. If you have a chiropractic, a group of practitioners, if there is a naturopathic place in town, all of these sort of complementary alternative health and wellness industries can be very open to astrology. You could offer to run a free or a low price introductory talk. So you could do a talk at the yoga studio. You could offer a special that partners with something the yoga studio is doing. You could record a short video to share online. Ideally, you'd pop that on your website, but maybe you share it on your YouTube channel or on social media. So, what you're really doing is you're taking the time to share about what you do with astrology. You might talk about a personal experience that shows astrology in action in your life or in the life of someone you know. You might share about astrology in action in a famous or well known person's chart. So, in this sort of space of giving time, not money, you're using your skills. It's a little bit of the equivalent of pounding the pavement, whether you're doing it online or in person. And this gives people a taste of your energy, and that is how people will ultimately connect with you. So, the giving time, not money, there's sort of a second piece here that isn't exactly that, but is in line with that, and that is teach something. So, I know you might be thinking that if you're having trouble finding clients, how will you be able to pull together a small group of people to share astrology with in a teaching space? The reason that this works is that it's less scary for people. So an introductory afternoon astrology event, whether it's a mini workshop or a talk that you're doing, it's close, it's bringing people in. Let me dip my toes into astrology, but it's not as personal or as intimate as really being very open one-on-one with someone. So from a client perspective, it can be a way of getting a feel for astrology, checking out the practitioner or the teacher. And as a result of that teaching experience, you will be so surprised as to how many people will want to schedule a one on one session and go deeper with you. So, teaching something is a way of you practicing sharing astrology in maybe a less intense or less intimate way than a one on one session. But it's also a great way for people to connect with astrology who may not know a lot about it. When you offer a teaching something, whether it's a workshop or an introductory talk of some kind, it's often also going to be at a lower price point. So that can make it more accessible to people. It also kind of reduces the risk or the investment for people. And one of the things you learn when you're establishing yourself as an astrologer is that there's a lot that goes on in the early part of your practice in terms of letting people know exactly what astrology is and how it works, because there are a lot of misconceptions. So, you stepping into the role of teacher, I've run afternoon talks or workshops that are intro to astrology, that are about full moon or new moon events, or about things like the solstice or the equinox. There's lots of ways you could use current astro timing as inspiration for a live afternoon or evening talk that you might give. Stepping into the role of teacher or the guide, the mentor, the facilitator, it also really instantly establishes some credibility and expertise around you in the astrological space. I know as a newer practitioner, you may be struggling with not knowing as much as your teachers, and you probably don't. That's okay. You know way more than most people will about astrology because if you've studied with a teacher for 2 or 3 or more years, you have gained a huge amount of wisdom that others are going to benefit from. So you don't have to know everything about astrology to start the journey with teaching. If you have already studied astrology in that structured way for a few years, I know that you could run an afternoon intro workshop or talk on the signs, the houses, or the planets based on what you already know. Sometimes it's fun to pick a theme. We're going to talk about the moon in the chart, and people are going to learn about their moon sign or their moon house and get a taste for how astrology might describe their emotional selves, for instance. So that is something that, as you know, a new practitioner, you could absolutely talk about, and it's going to be really interesting for people to come along to. So, me personally, I've always noticed that teaching has led to an increased demand for one on one consults. So, if you are thinking about how can I build my client practice, I would really encourage you to teach something. It only has to be at that beginner or introductory level, but you'll be amazed how much students get out of it and how much that helps people get to know you as a potential practitioner. So that is our second tip. The third tip that I want to share is the introductory or special offer. So, as you're starting to share about astrology, perhaps you're doing it through writing online or video online, or you're doing it in person, people are going to, get a feel for you, and that's going to be great. Once you already have clients, they are going to fall into a regular pattern of scheduling with you. And just as a little tip, in astrology, a repeat or regular client may typically book every 6 or 12 months. But I know at this point you're thinking about, well, I'm trying to attract new clients. I don't have a lot of clients. So even the repeats, once a year, that's not enough to sustain you from an income perspective. So what we're thinking about here with the introductory or special offer is we want to create something that is super appealing and really easy for people to try out. So this is where you might run a shorter mini session, maybe 15, 20, or 30 minutes. You're going to put it at a lower price point, again, so that there's less barriers to entry and people think, well, I'll try it out and see. So this is what you want to think about if you're trying to entice, early clients or new clients to take the plunge and spend some time with you in this sacred space of an astrology session. So you might offer a shorter taster style session. Maybe it's around 30 minutes or so. You can still charge for this, but you're going to charge at a much lower rate than your regular session fee. The reason for this is that when people are thinking about trying something for the first time, price can be a bit of a factor. And so, what the introductory or special offer does is it can remove that as a barrier to somebody trying out. So, a special themed offer is something you could also consider, like a relationships focus session or mini session around February, for instance. Whether you are into Valentine's Day or not, there's a lot of cultural discussion about love and relationships in February, and that can be a lovely time to drop a relationships themed offering, especially if you're thinking about how could I maybe attract some new clients. You could do something about relationships that's timed to a special astrological event that Venus is going through. Maybe it's Venus retrograde, and you think we're going to do a relationships themed session while Venus retrograde is happening. Now, if you're going to do that, please do use the word relationships or love in the name of the offering. Venus retrograde means a lot to us as astrologers. It doesn't always mean as much as we think in the marketplace to regular everyday people. And so we want to sort of remind them that, yeah, Venus is retrograde, but what we're really talking about is relationships. That's just sort of an off the top of my head suggestion here. You could do career themed things at a certain time of year. You could do money and financial themed things at certain times of the year. You can do moon themed things around Mother's Day or other times of the year. So there's lots of ways you can tie astrological parts of the chart and themes to sort of social or cultural things that go on throughout the year. So, this idea of an introductory or a special offer, you as the practitioner get to set the parameters of what that is, but it can be a really fun way to encourage or make it enticing for new clients to connect with you as a practitioner. And you, because you're setting the parameters, you can make it about anything that you love. Maybe you love working with topics like growth, expansion, or abundance. And so you might put together a special session that's all about Jupiter in the chart. And what I would encourage you to think about is for these types of special themes or introductory offers, consider making them available for just a limited amount of time. And that means if people are interested, they're going to take that offer up in the next few weeks while it's available. So there's lots you can do there. Maybe Saturn's changing signs, and you think, okay, we're going to do a special Saturn transit tips session, for instance. The possibilities here are really only limited by your imagination. But the big tip is to think about an introductory or special offer. So, an introductory offer would be a shorter, lower price, like taster session. A special offer might be something that has a theme or a limited window of time in which it's available. So, that is tip number three. And tip number four, I think it's really important in the context of having a client based business or a client based practice, but it might not be what you're thinking. And tip number four is respect the repeats. And so I know that continuing to find new clients is going to be important to help you grow your astrology practice. It's equally, and some would say even more important, to continue to serve and support your existing clients. So how can you do this? What does respect to the repeats mean? Follow up with past clients. So most clients love to reconnect every 6 to 12 months. In my experience, in the practice that I run, the majority of clients like an annual session. I have another group of clients who prefer to check in a little more frequently, and that's usually every 6 months. I have just a couple of clients who like an even more frequent check in, but that is definitely a much smaller group. And so in my experience with having an astrology practice, the thing that's going to happen most often is that people will come once every year or so for a session. It's okay to check in with your clients at the 6 month mark. How are you tracking? Do you want to touch base and have a follow up session about something? I think respecting the repeats is a way of building professional kinds of follow up into your astrology practice. And I talk about that idea of being, thinking about yourself as a professional practitioner a lot in group mentoring when I'm working with newer practitioners, because sometimes we don't recognize the expertise that we have as astrologers. And that can have to do with a number of reasons: the way astrology is viewed in society or culturally. It can be our own insecurities. It can be baggage we have from our family or our friends, or who knows. But the idea here is that we are professional practitioners and we can conduct ourselves in such a way, whether we have a regulating body or not. If you have studied, a structured program, 2, 3, or 4 years in astrology, I really want you to be proud of that. And I want you to appreciate the value that that has out in the world. So, respecting the repeats is sort of bringing that idea of professional practice into, well, I worked with this client a year ago. It's totally appropriate to email them, check in, and see if they would like to schedule an annual checkup or a new year ahead session. So, following up with past clients, you can do this at 6 or 12 month intervals. You might want to check in with them around their birthday, maybe with a special offer, something like, save 20% if you book another session or your next session in the month of your birthday. So, why would we do this? There is a little understanding in business that it's much easier to keep an existing client than it is to find a new one. And so, your existing and loyal clients, even if right now that's just 3 or 4 of them, they're actually an important part of your marketing team, whether you realize it or not. Because they are the people, your current clients are the people who can provide those golden word of mouth referrals about you. And that idea of people providing word of mouth referrals, and what that means is when somebody who's had a great experience with you tells their friend, tells their aunt, sends their sister, sends their boss, that word of mouth is the gold standard in building your client practice. When one client speaks highly of you to their friends, their family, their coworkers, and so even if you only have a handful of clients, make sure that you're taking really good care of them. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries and we're not structured about how we interact with them. Not saying that you're going to be available 24/7 and you're not going to be doing things free or anything like that, but you're going to act in that sort of professional, responsible way that says, hey, yeah, it's been a little while. Do you want to check back in? I know it's your birthday this month. Would you like to get a sense of what the next 12 months might be like for you? And if this helps, I've got a 10 or a 20% coupon that you can use, if you schedule anytime in the next 4 weeks. So that idea of respecting the repeats, I think, is something that is not to be underestimated. It was something I just kind of fell into doing from very early in my practice. And I used to do it as a special offer on their birthday, which was a great way to kind of remind the client, oh, yeah, astrology, I can go back to that person and get more. There'll be new cycles, new predictive themes. From a practitioner perspective, it also helped spread the client work out over the course of the year. You may or may not be finding this yet, but as your client practice grows, you will notice that lots of people want to do, what is the year ahead going to be like? And that can make November, December, and January super busy for client consults, which is great. But of course, you want to have ways that you can also fill in the gaps at other times of the year. So just sort of gently encouraging people to book sessions around their birthday can spread out the client work through the year as well. So that's another little tip there. So many tips. Sharing tips about helping you build your astrology practice is one of my favorite things to do. And it's so important to me to help encourage and support new practitioners that each year I run a very special, intensive group mentoring process that is designed to help you start and grow your own astrology practice. We are starting the 2024 cohort of group mentoring on August 31st. So if you would like to join us, I have a special code where you can save 10%, and that code is GM10, so GM10. If you take that code over to kellysastrology.com, you can enter that code when you check out as you're registering for group mentoring, and you can save 10% off the sign-up fee. We will be meeting over the next few months, and I'm going to take you into so much detail and so much support about pricing and promoting your services, about what teaching astrology looks like, how to talk with clients, so many things that maybe you haven't even thought of that will be helpful as you're getting started as an astrology practitioner. So if that's of interest to you, I hope that you join us for group mentoring. And even if you don't, I hope these tips help you get started in your own astrology practice. Even if you just take one idea out of today's session that you turn into action steps over the next few weeks, that's going to be fantastic. You've created some progress. These are just a few of the steps that have helped me build my own client practice over the last 20 plus years. I started really slowly and I gradually attracted more clients over time. I didn't spend a lot of money on advertising. I didn't have a lot of clients in the beginning, but I stayed really consistent with my offerings, with my follow up, and with my kind of reaching out to potential new clients. I worked with my strengths and things that I was interested in. For instance, I do really enjoy writing and I can do it reasonably well. So, writing things to share with people was really easy for me. I was kind of lucky in that regard because the internet runs on algorithms, which are based on words. And so, even if you don't feel you're a great writer, I do think putting your astrological ideas into words and sharing them online is a really helpful way for new people to find you. Ultimately, though, the best thing is going to be for you to do the same, to work with your strengths and use them to share about what you can offer and how you can help people. What I've noticed over the years of being in the very privileged position of guiding, supporting, and mentoring new practitioners is that this organic and authentic approach to building a practice leads to incredibly loyal clients. I have clients that I have worked with almost the whole time I've been in practice now, definitely close to 20 years. It's not a recipe for overnight success. I don't have any secrets about that. That's not been my experience, but I am so happy to be able to have as many clients that I do to work with, to share astrology with. That has just allowed me to build this kind of thriving practice. And that has really allowed me to do something that I never thought was possible, which was to use astrology as a tool to help and guide so many other people over the years. It has felt like magic for me. And that's why I want to help you step into this space, because if it feels even half as magical for you as it has felt for me, you're going to feel so fulfilled and so much. You're going to feel like you are just living your purpose, and you're going to be helping others to do the same. So there are our 4 tips for today. Give time, not money. Teach something. Offer a special or an introductory offer, and respect the repeats. If you have other tips that have worked helping you attract or find clients in your practice, let us know in the comments below. And if you would like even more structured support, guidance to help you set yourself up for success in your own astrology practice, I hope to see you in group mentoring starting at the end of August. You can find out more details over at kellysastrology.com. You can also use that code GM10 to save 10% off your registration. That's it from me this week, team. Thanks so much for listening. I look forward to sharing even more astrology with you next week. Until then, take care.